What's going on, guys, and welcome to today's video. And today we are going to be doing a rear suspension spring swap on the TRX. Now, I am not installing some cool aftermarket progressive geyser springs or Eibach springs or something. I am just replacing my springs due to the service bulletin lean that these trucks had. Yeah, there's an old video on it that I've got talking about getting that fixed. But what I kind of wanted to show you was kind of a cool, cheap-ish tool that I found to help replace the springs on our trucks, because I work at a shop and I have replaced a few springs on TRXs, and honestly, they are kind of a pain in the butt. Normally, you would lift a vehicle up on a lift, unbolt the rear shocks, and unbolt the track bar, and then lower the rear axle down, and that typically gives you enough room to remove the springs with absolutely no issue. All my Wranglers that I lift and Gladiators, all of that stuff, that's how I do the rear suspension. Rear springs fall out, you put the new ones in, you bolt it back together, and you're done. The first TRX that I did rear springs on, I unbolted the rear shocks, unbolted the track bar, let the suspension come down as far as it could, and the springs are so outrageously long that they still will not unseat. So I kind of hung on the axle and then pry barred and got the spring out of there, but it was not very nice, and there wasn't a good feeling about doing it just because you're pry barring a spring that is like 2 feet long out of the truck. So, like I said, I found this really cheap tool on eBay. It is a on-car spring compressor that you can basically put in place, compress the spring down, and then remove the spring. So I've got it here in the back of the truck. I'll show you guys. And no, they didn't send me this tool. I just bought it myself because it looked like it would be helpful. And hopefully today we're going to use it on the back of the truck here and get my new springs installed, hopefully without taking out a single bolt. So guys, here is this 8-mile McPherson strut spring compressor, just a kind of relatively cheap tool on eBay. I'm sure it's Chinese, but it seems to do the job. I believe it was like 150 bucks or 20 bucks. It was relatively inexpensive for a tool. Now it comes with this big, huge metal piece here and a bunch of different sized, adapters that you would bolt onto the tool like so, and then it can go onto a spring. You tighten the bolt down and it compresses the spring. Now here is a rear TRX spring. If you haven't obviously seen one loose, it is a ridiculously big thing. I mean, I don't have a tape measure here, but it's really tall. It's outrageous unloaded. I believe TRXs have the longest rear springs of a production vehicle or something like that. I think that claim was at least made or said. But yeah, this is the ridiculously long spring that comes factory on a TRX. So hopefully with this tool, I'll be able to just basically compress that spring, get it out of the way, get the new one in, and we'll check it out. Now, are you probably wanting to buy a tool if you're only replacing springs one time? Maybe not, but if you and a couple of your buddies have trucks and you're gonna be putting, aftermarket springs, you could at least split the cost. Again, the thing was only like 100 and some bucks. That's typically cheaper than an hour of shop rate at any shop to install parts. So you could buy this, do it yourself in the driveway, and I don't know, be able to quickly swap springs out. So let's get into the shop. Let's see how this tool works and hopefully get some new rear springs on this truck. All right, guys, so here is this crazy spring compressor that we were talking about, and we're hopefully, without pulling any hardware, going to get this spring compressed enough and remove it. And guys, I think with that, we are going to basically be able to get this thing kind of rotated and tipped out without pulling a single bolt. Now we are going to want to make sure we get the spring compressor put back on the new spring, kind of in the same orientation, kind of looking at where the spring tails are here. So, we've got the tail of the spring both in the same spot. We'll get the compressor swapped over just equally because in the truck, those spring tails kind of fit in a certain location. Now that we've got that spring set up where we need to go, we'll just loosen the compressor and we should be done. And guys, just like that, we've got a spring installed, a TRX, without pulling a single bolt, shock bolt, track bar bolt, anything. Well guys, as you saw, that tool worked surprisingly well. I had to kind of clamp it down pretty decently, but once it was unseated, that spring just kind of picked up and came out of there. Now, I did kind of need to really make sure I had that tool re-clamped on the new spring correctly so you could get it seated, because like we talked about, that spring tail, you know, needs to go up into a certain spot up in that upper spring isolator. But other than that, it worked really, really well. I'm gonna be kind of happy to have this thing on, you know, other suspension lifts or stuff like that. It's just gonna be kind of useful. Now, it is relatively cheap, so will it, you know, fail after a few uses? I have no idea, but it worked fine on the back of the truck, and that is what I bought it for. So guys, I don't know, if you're doing springs, or you've got a couple of buddies and you're going to be doing springs, this may be something to look into. There was quite a few different brands out there and all the prices were similar. So I don't know, do some research, figure out what one is available, and order you up a spring compressor. It definitely came in handy on the TRX. So guys, just another, you know, suspension replacement, whatever we do with this thing. And guys, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.